In western Scotland, towering over the crystal-clear waters of Loch Awe, stands Ben Cruachan Mountain. Not only does it cradle the namesake dam and reservoir, but it also creates absolutely stunning views. The area is home to a huge variety of wildlife, but most visitors come here for something you can't actually see. At least not just by looking at the scenic panorama. Ben Cruachan is a hollow mountain, just a rocky shell, with one of Europe's most impressive engineering marvels hidden 1,066 feet underground. What's inside? Essentially a giant battery that just might be capable of changing the way we think about generating electricity. To make sense of all this, I definitely need some coffee. Just an unobtrusive reminder to do you-know-what under the video. And a big thanks to those who get what I mean. So what kind of mountain is this? Ben Cruachan is the highest peak in Argyll and Bute, standing at 3,700 feet. It's part of the Cruachan Horseshoe, a popular ring of peaks for climbers surrounding the power station's reservoir. And within this mountain, which looks plain as can be, lies a massive man-made cave, stretching 120 feet in length and soaring 295 feet high. That's enough room to fit some kind of medieval cathedral. But instead of a cathedral here, behind solid granite walls, there's the Cruachan Power Station, a subterranean world of machine halls, power lines, and turbines rated at 440 megawatts. That's enough power to supply electricity to almost 100,000 homes, or a city the size of Edinburgh. But even in the aerial photos of this area, you won't see any hints that something so grand is hidden inside the mountain. The only way to find out is to take a tour inside the mountain. Sounds like we're heading to Erebor or something like that, don't you think? To reach the heart of the mountain, you have to walk down a road that's about a mile long, through a pitch-black entrance and past dark corners and creepy tunnels. They'll lead you to the control rooms in massive caves. Sounds massive. But it's not just about the size, even though that does matter. We'll get back to that a bit later. But for now, I'll just say that the existence of the Cruachan power plant is a step toward zero emissions. Actually, Cruachan is one of the 4 pumped storage power plants in the United Kingdom. They started building it in 1959, and Queen Elizabeth II inaugurated it on October 15, 1965. That's quite fast for digging out a massive mountain from within. To pull this off in such a short time, they needed a workforce of 4,000 people. These people are known as tunnel tigers because of their strong work ethic. During 6 years of construction from 1959 to 1965, they drilled, blasted, and dug out rock by hand and filled it with gelignite. Working in the dark, they eventually removed more than 7.8 million cubic feet of gravel. It was exhausting work during 12 to 18-hour shifts with a constant haze of thick dust and smoke in the air. Loose rocks the size of cars would frequently tumble down from the open walls, while blasts in the tunnel made it seem like the mountain was trembling. Several workers lost their lives during construction, and later on they said it felt like fighting a war with the mountain. So how does everything work here? Well, first off, to make Cruachan operational, they had to build a reservoir at the top of the mountain from which water could flow down into the lake below. Good thing there was already a natural valley in the mountains that formed a niche for the reservoir, but they still needed to hold the water there. To do this, a 1,037-foot-long dam was built. Once the construction was finished, rainwater filled the reservoir through a 12-mile network of tunnels. Not right away, of course. Filling it took 9 months, and it's the rainwater that still provides about 10% of the energy produced at the power station. What about the dam? It's a concrete barrier weighing 200,000 tons that's actually a complex moving structure with gates that open and close. But all this equipment is kept out of sight from outsiders to preserve the look of the surrounding environment. Like I said, you can get to the power plant through a tunnel that's wide enough for cars to drive through easily, but what really surprises me is that inside the mountain, it's warm. Even though there might be snow on the surrounding mountains, the temperature at the power station always stays a steady 64 degrees Fahrenheit, since it's nestled deep inside Ben Cruachan. There's really a lot going on here. 12 miles of tunnels and chambers, including the machine hall, plus they built 1 dam, 2 levees, 13 aqueducts, and 3 power plants. Just to give you an idea of how big they made the machine room, it's tall enough to fit the Tower of London in it, and wide enough to fit Big Ben lying on its side. But of course there's no Tower of London or Big Ben. Instead, there are turbines generating electricity, and each one weighs 650 tons. And the most amazing thing is that all this equipment you see looks like an iceberg. Not in the sense that it's cold and can sink ships, it's just that you see only the tip. Most of the gear is hidden beneath the feet of everyone who comes to the power plant. And now we get to the big question. How does a power station tucked away in a mountain actually work? Standard power grids usually work with just-in-time energy, where the exact demand is estimated every minute and electricity is generated and distributed based on that. This means the system is always under supervision. If demand goes higher than supply, it can cause power limits or even blackouts. Fortunately, the biggest part of the demand is predictable. There's a daily cycle of electricity consumption, usually known as the duck curve, tracing the profile of the duck's back and neck throughout the day. The tail of the duck represents a low morning peak when people wake up and start their day. Then there's a steady demand until evening. That's the duck's backline, followed by a sharp spike in demand, which corresponds to the back of the duck's neck. The peak happens in the evening when everyone turns on the lights, cooks dinner, does homework, or watches TV. Finally, there's a nightly minimum of overall demand when most people are sleeping, and then it starts all over again. But when demand goes up sharply, electricity often comes from peaker plants that are designed to kick in when needed and run on fossil fuels. Usually it's gas. Of course, it costs a lot to operate, but what can you do? Demand is demand. So Cruachan is kind of a peaker plant, but unlike all the others, it can switch from idle to generating electricity in just a few minutes. That's why pumped storage power plants are also called water batteries. To put it simply, you could say they consist of two big reservoirs located at different heights. Using 4 reversible turbines, the pumped storage power plant lifts water from the lake up to fill the mountain reservoir when the demand for electricity is low. The water up there acts as a charged battery. And then when the demand suddenly spikes, the stored water is released and flows through underground rotors to generate electricity at high speed. When needed, the power can be up and running in just 28 seconds. In comparison, a traditional coal-fired power plant can take several hours to get going. When it comes to volume, the reservoir holds 2.6 billion gallons, enough to meet all of the UK's household water needs. Basically, that's more than 2,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So just imagine how much energy you could generate with the push of a button. And it'll last a long time. When the reservoir's full, the water can generate electricity for up to 22 hours. So what happens next? After the demand goes down and the Brits go to sleep, the generators start running in reverse. Instead of falling water spinning the turbines to generate electricity, this very electricity is directed to the generators, making the blades spin. Now it's an electric motor, and the turbine works like a pump, lifting water back up the shaft to a high tank and restarting the system. It's an amazingly efficient process with about 75% of the energy available for reuse. Basically, the main job of the Cruachan station is to balance supply and demand by storing up extra electricity. For example, when the wind turbines in Scotland generate more energy than we need, Cruachan steps in and stores the renewable energy so it doesn't go to waste. But it's also used to handle sudden spikes in electricity demand, like at the end of popular TV shows. I'll admit I hadn't heard about this before, but it really happens in the UK and includes sudden spikes in demand for the national power grid. They happen when a lot of people are watching the same TV show at the same time. It's strange how a big interest in a particular program can affect electricity consumption, right? It's all about the commercial breaks. When a show takes a break, viewers decide it's a good time to, you guessed it, make themselves a cup of tea or coffee. This causes huge synchronized spikes in electricity consumption across the country. I'm serious. Stats confirm it. During breaks in popular TV shows, there's a surge in demand driven by millions of electric kettles being turned on. Kettles in the UK are especially powerful, usually consuming 2,500 to 3,000 watts, creating a really high peak demand on the power grid. This is a totally unique situation you can only see in Great Britain. There's even data on the biggest spike that happened on July 4th, 1990. Back then, the demand of 2,800 megawatts was triggered by the end of a penalty shootout in the World Cup semifinal between England and West Germany. That's so very British. Basically, the Cruachan station and other stations in the UK like it were designed during the heyday of synchronous broadcast television. This was a time when nearly everyone in the UK could watch the same series or sports event at the same time. And even with the rise of the internet, these spikes keep getting registered. The most recent huge spike in demand happened on July 14th, 2024 during, yep, you guessed it, football. Spain faced off against England in the Euro Championship final. So those sudden spikes in electricity usage aren't going anywhere. No wonder Drax, the owner of the Cruachan station, is now planning to boost its battery capacity by 600 megawatts, which is more than double what it is now. They've already got the government's approval. You can't do anything here without the permission and backing from the power, since expanding needs massive investments, more than $100 million, and the building will take between 5 and 8 years. However, these investments will definitely pay off. As soon as the system starts working, it makes the electricity supply cheaper for a long time. If the upgrade happens, the station's total capacity will hit 1.04 gigawatts to reach its full renewable potential by 2030 and help Scotland hit net zero targets by 2045. Basically, to put it simply, Cruachan 2.0 makes sure there won't be a comeback of fossil fuels. It's a win for ecology. They plan to start construction as early as 2025. By the way, this giant battery can save the UK in case of a total power outage. Near the station, there's an emergency power system, diesel generators with fuel supplies connected to a battery bank. If everything goes down, like a complete power outage across the whole island of Great Britain, this setup can provide enough electricity to open the valves at Cruachan, letting water flow from the upper reservoir to the spinning turbines, powering the station, and sending electricity into the national grid. This will help kickstart other systems that don't have their own backup power. This is called a black start. If we go into more detail, a black start is the process of getting a power plant, part of the power grid, or an industrial facility back up and running after a complete or partial shutdown. Takes a lot of energy for this, but our battery inside the mountain can provide just that. Plus, the entire structure tucked away inside the mountain has a really positive impact on nature. Do you remember? I brought this up at the start of the video. So currently, the biodiversity around the dam is simply amazing. There are butterflies, raptors, and deer. This shows once more that nature can flourish next to a project of this size if it's done properly. And since the power station has no visual impact and doesn't contaminate the water, soil, or air, the animals are doing great living next to it. Enough time has passed to draw some conclusions. Basically, Cruachan has been operating for almost 60 years without harming the wilderness. You can even find species of birds and insects here whose numbers are dwindling in other parts of the UK. They also promised that the power plant expansion will only happen after a careful assessment of the area's biodiversity to minimize any impact the project might have. Even though the only indication of the power plant by the lake is the number of power poles in the area, the power lines are still buried underground. No wonder that the Nature Conservation Group put Cruachan on the list of the 60 most significant post-war Scottish architectural landmarks. Every year, the station attracts 50,000 visitors. However, it's worth mentioning that there are 3 more pumped storage power stations in the UK. For example, the Dinorwig Power Station in Llanberis, Wales, which is hidden away inside the largest artificial cave in Europe. This is a really huge cave, as tall as 2 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other. When the turbines of this power plant are fully flowing, enough water passes through every second to fill an 82-foot swimming pool. And even at that speed, the artificial waterfall inside the mountain can keep generating electricity for 6 hours before the water runs out. Dinorwig, just like Cruachan, really enhances the reliability of the UK's power grid. But building this power station wasn't easy either. Building the cave and the structure cost about $650 million, making it at the time the largest civil engineering contract ever awarded by the UK government. But it's not just the UK that's building these batteries. One of the most impressive power plants you can see for yourself is Snoqualmie Falls near Seattle, USA. Its construction was actually completed in 1899, making this site the oldest underground power station in the world. There's also the Robert Bourassa Generating Station in Quebec, Canada. It has a whopping 16 turbines and is the largest underground power station in the world. But all of these power plants have one thing in common. They've made the most of their landscape to produce sustainable green energy. Altogether, they're starting a new era in energy supply, so we definitely need more of these power stations. And they're being built. Literally this year, a new pumped storage battery opened in the Swiss Alps, the Nantes de Drance power station. Its scale is simply colossal. 2 reservoirs, one 1,640 feet higher than the other, are connected by a giant pipe running through the mountain. And to get to the huge turbine hall, located 1,970 feet underground, you have to travel a full 3.7 miles of tunnels. With a full flow, enough water passes through the pipe to fill an Olympic swimming pool in 10 seconds. The battery stores enough electricity to power 1 million homes for 15 hours. That's almost equal to the combined population of Edinburgh and Glasgow. Sure, the power station's in Switzerland, but it looks like Scottish engineers are planning to take notes from their colleagues to create new batteries. For example, near Loch Ness. Don't worry about Nessie if you happen to believe in her. After all, these stations are super eco-friendly. Need more batteries. I didn't mention adopting the experience in Loch Ness for nothing. In the next few years, the United Kingdom could end up with lots of these batteries, all in order to carbon neutrality by 2050 and having fresh energy storage capabilities. According to the Energy Minister, Michael Shanks, no energy storage facilities have been built in the last 40 years because it's just too expensive, even though operating costs are low. Dozens of water batteries will allow for the storage of excess clean energy from renewable sources. This, in turn, will help strengthen energy security by reducing the dependence on fossil fuels. And of course, the UK is pursuing a major goal to become a leader in clean energy. It seems that the plans are destined to come true very soon. Several projects are already in the works, including a water battery on Loch Ness, but a few doesn't mean many, so new energy storage sites will be popping up regularly. For example, the energy regulator Ofgem is busy developing schemes and plans to open applications from investors and everyone interested in 2025. Close to remember. As I mentioned before, building the Cruachan power station turned out to be an incredible engineering achievement accomplished under tough conditions, but it also cost the lives of 15 people. The work was physically demanding, which is why a team of 4,000 people with different skills was hired. The most dangerous part of the job involved drilling, blasting, and removing rock inside the cliff. That's where the workers from this group lost their lives. But what does clothing have to do with it? The thing is, 60 years after the start of construction of the legendary pumped storage power station, its owner, Drax Group, commissioned a new tartan in memory of those 15 workers. It includes 15 dark blue threads. According to the manager of the visitor center on the mountain, the commemorative clothing is intended for the tour guides. Now they wear special tartan waistcoats and proudly tell the story of how the power station came to be. The new tartan was also used to make some special scarves that you can buy at the visitor center shop. Oh, and I almost forgot to explain what tartan is. It's a plaid pattern made up of horizontal and vertical stripes, along with rectangular areas filled with diagonal lines. Tartan is a classic design for Scotland, where it can symbolize a specific clan, region, or organization. All in all, it's a perfect choice to honor the memory. A mural in the mountain. Inside a 0.6-mile-long tunnel carved into Mount Ben Cruachan above the massive turbines, there's an unusual object for a power station, an artwork. A wooden mural covered in gold might seem out of place among the stone walls and all the machinery, but it actually fits right in. The fresco literally tells the story of how the power station was created and serves as a kind of reminder that nature and technology can exist together in harmony. But let's get into the details. First off, it's worth mentioning that the mural is absolutely massive. It's 48 feet long and 12 feet high. Besides wood, plastic, and gold leaf, it's decorated with Celtic crosses and textures that look like granite cliffs, as well as golden spheres that resemble city lights powered by Ben Cruachan Mountain. The mural was commissioned to celebrate the opening of the power station, which took place on October 15, 1965, in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II, who, by the way, is also depicted here. At that time, out of 4 reversible turbines with a capacity of 100 megawatts each, only 2 had been completed and put into operation. But still, the station became the first of its kind operating on such a big scale. A mural was a must, you see. Floating power station. Back in 2015, the International Energy Agency reported that by the end of 2020, 26% of the world's energy needs would be met by clean, renewable energy. This was great news because fossil fuels, which are heavily used for energy, have a huge impact on the climate. But I'm sure you know all this already. So the idea was successfully brought to life. In 2017, the Norwegian energy company Statoil launched an innovative project called Hywind, located 18 miles off the east coast of Scotland. It featured 5 massive floating turbines that generate 135 gigawatt hours of electricity each year. To put that in perspective, that's enough power to supply around 20,000 households. The electricity is transmitted to mainland Scotland via underwater cables anchored to the seabed, and despite the project's scale, it remains economically viable. The cost of generating wind energy is comparable to the expense of operating natural gas power plants. It's interesting that Hywind became the world's first floating power station, so the world hadn't seen anything like this before. Moreover, according to data released in 2021, Scotland's Hywind is the most efficient offshore wind farm in the UK. They really did a great job. Power station for pine martens. What's the best way to demonstrate how safe something is for the environment? Of course, having some wildlife around. At the power station on Ben Cruachan, a family of 4 pine martens was spotted. They didn't just come to check it out, they actually made it their home. And keep in mind, pine martens are among the rarest mammals in the UK. According to a worker at the local cafe, pine martens used to run around here before, but this particular group liked the power station so much that they decided to settle down. The adults often hang out by the lake and run around looking for food every day. They bring it back to their little ones in the den, then come back to eat themselves. This family scene makes the power station a unique spot for both staff and visitors. It's basically a National Geographic film happening right under your nose. Visitors are asked to be careful and not leave food unattended. Well, these are pine martens after all. They're always looking to snatch something. It used to be just trash can thefts, but over time, these little critters started feeling like they owned the place, stealing seeds from bird feeders, and then they moved on to human plates. And it's not just plates. They even climb into tourist buses. Naturally, to get them out of there, you have to share your food. Overall, the pine martens totally approve of the power plant. And I approve when you hit the like button, especially at the end of the video. See you later.